Hello, and thanks for joining me for a quick chat about chapter 22 of the Discourses by Epictetus. This chapter is titled On Primary Conceptions. So, I had to read through this a number of times to sort of get, I think, an idea of what Epictetus was talking about with regard to primary conceptions. And I think, I gather that primary conceptions probably has a deeper philosophical meaning in Stoicism than just this simple, what's presented here in this simple discourse, but we'll just focus on the discourse. He talks about, in the discourse itself, he actually defines primary conceptions like these common concepts that everyone pretty much has in common. So, the example he uses is like, who doesn't think that, good is desirable, and who doesn't think that justice is noble? So justice, the good, these sort of concepts that we all sort of share. So if we all share these concepts, then why would there be conflicts around them? So Epictetus talks about where one person, for example, may say, "Oh, he did so well. He is very brave," and then another person says, "No, he's out of his mind." Two different people have two different perceptions around whether or not this other person is, good, if he did good. And so another example that Epictetus gives in this discourse is around religion, where, different people may have different different people may have a common concept of the divine, but have different sort of interpretations of that. So some people may interpret the divine through different dietary restrictions, different rituals, things like that, so that therefore a conflict could arise around the concept of divine. And so, Epictetus then goes on to say, someone asked in the discourse, what are we to do with this sort of to avoid these kind of conflicts? And Epictetus says, you need to use your reason to your rationality to determine the concept, the primary concept, and then you need to also keep in mind what is in your power to control, what is in your power and what is not in your power. So, what is in your control, what is not in your control. So, for example, you may have, figure out your own your concept of the divine using your rationality, but then, you can't control someone else doing a different ritual. You can't control that. So that would be something outside of your control. So other people, all other people are really outside of your control. And so that's something to keep in mind. So, last night I was reading through this book. I was reading through an essay in this Thoughts from the Dark Corner. This is by J.P. Pereira, and I'm going to actually have a book chat coming up on this very soon because I'm almost finished with it. But the essay called Self-Implosion presents an example, I thought, that was a really good example of primary conceptions that in the essay, in this particular book, he wasn't talking about primary conceptions in the sense of Stoicism, but nevertheless, he gave a really good example in that essay that really pulled a thread with me about primary conceptions in the Discourses by Epictetus. So I just thought I'd share that. I mean, I'm not using the exact example, but this is sort of what the example I came up with for primary conceptions after reading this essay, and that is, let's take two people. Let's say spouse number one and spouse number two. And spouse number one notices on spouse number two's phone that spouse number two has been messaging another person, and with they're flirting with each other. And so spouse number one spouse number one confronts spouse number two about this, and spouse number two says, I didn't cheat because there wasn't anything sexual. So spouse number one agrees that there was nothing overtly sexual in the communication, but nevertheless considers it cheating. So this cheating we may have a concept, they have a common concept that cheating is bad, but they're defining that in two different ways. So spouse number two is saying, I didn't cheat because there wasn't anything sexual, and spouse number one is saying, yeah, but just the simple fact that you're having this interaction is cheating. And so they're defining that differently. And so what would spouse number one, what would the options be, open to spouse number one and spouse number two, based on this discourse by Epictetus? And, I gave it some thought, and I was thinking, spouse number one, spouse number one and spouse number two can either have a discourse between them and come to a common interpretation of the primary conception of cheating, or spouse number, they can continue to disagree in that one thinks the other one cheated and the other one thinks that they did not cheat. But then, the options that are open to each of them are actually a lot. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, spouse number one has to then come to terms with, okay, well, I have a spouse who has a fundamental different idea of cheating than I do, and so I can either my only option, if that's going to be the case, is to either accept that or not, ultimately, because spouse number one will never be able to control spouse number two completely, in the view of Epictetus. So spouse number two, on the other hand, could say, okay, within spouse number two's control, could say, okay, I fundamentally feel like that I did not cheat, but my spouse thinks that I did, and so in order to not hurt my spouse, I'm going to no longer do this behavior, and I will abide by spouse number one's definition of cheating. So that's in spouse number two's control. So both spouse number one and spouse number two have areas that only they can control in how that they approach the situation. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. That interaction between two spouses, to me, really sort of brought that to the now. Brought that and made this brought the whole idea of primary conception to me, and made it very relevant. So I hope it made some sense. All right, well, I'm going to leave that discourse with that. The next chapter is called, chapter 23 is called Against Epicurus. So I don't know, I haven't read through that yet. We'll see what Epictetus has to say about that in a chat soon to come. So until then, take care.